Welcome to the Explainer. You ever been on a train, scanned your ticket on an app, and then a few minutes later someone still comes around to check it? It feels like one of those jobs that should have been automated years ago, right? But what if checking that ticket is actually the least important part of their job?
Yeah, it's a question a lot of us have asked ourselves. We can buy a ticket on our phone, we can scan it at a gate, we can find our seat, all without talking to a single person. So why do we still see staff walking up and down the aisles? Well, it turns out that the answer reveals we're not just asking the wrong question, we're kind of looking at the wrong problem entirely.
You see, according to some really detailed research by Dr. Partha Majumdar, when we focus on just checking tickets, we're fundamentally misunderstanding what a conductor's role is all about. The real problem isn't about replacing one single task, no. It's about re-engineering an entire system of safety and service that honestly, most of us never even see.
This right here is the perfect way to visualize it. What we see is just the tip of the iceberg, ticket enforcement. But underneath the surface, that's where the real job is. That's the stuff conductors are legally required to be on many trains for. Safety in an emergency, service for passengers, and security when things go wrong. Look, automating ticket checks, that's the easy part. Automating all of that, now that's the real challenge.
So before we can even begin to talk about a solution, we have to really fully deconstruct the job we're trying to replace. Let's break down what a conductor actually does, far, far beyond just scamming your ticket.
These are basically the 4 pillars of the conductor's role that any automated system has to solve. In an emergency, they are the legally mandated person in charge. They provide absolutely crucial assistance to passengers with disabilities. They mediate conflicts, and that happens way more often than you'd think. And they even manage revenue on the fly, like, say, allocating a vacant seat to a waitlisted passenger, which captures money that would have otherwise just been lost.
This statement just perfectly nails the central argument of Dr. Majumdar's framework. You can't just stick a sensor on a seat and call it a day. It doesn't work like that. You have to build a new, comprehensive system that can handle every single one of those human-led functions. So the question is, how on earth do you actually do that?
Well, this is where Dr. Majumdar proposes a really fascinating 4-part socio-technical system. It's this integrated approach that tackles the problem from every single angle, from the station platform all the way to a central data hub.
So here's the roadmap. First, you control who gets in at the station. That's the perimeter. Next, you add senses to the train itself. All of that data gets fed into a central brain. And finally, and this is probably the most important part, you completely redefine the human role on board. Let's start with that perimeter.
This slide lays out the trade-offs perfectly. On one hand, you have proven, super-fast technologies like the NFC cards they use in London or Tokyo. Then there's QR codes, which are cheap to implement but, as we all know, can be painfully slow and clunky, creating bottlenecks. And then you have facial recognition. It's the most seamless option for sure, but as the source material puts it, it's ethically toxic because of massive privacy and surveillance concerns.
But here's the biggest problem with relying only on station gates. A lot of rail networks are open. They have these small, unstaffed platforms where pretty much anyone can just walk on. And that means perimeter control alone just isn't enough. You have to have intelligence on the train itself.
And that brings us to the second layer, the intelligent carriage. The idea here is to literally embed the train with sensors that create a live digital map of who is where. It's like giving the train its own eyes and ears. But the kind of sensor you use really depends on the type of train service.
And this is where the system gets really smart. For a long-distance train where you've got reserved seats, you need a grid of IoT sensors to check that a specific person is in a specific seat. But for a packed commuter train, you don't need that. You just need an accurate head count to match against the number of people who tapped in. And for that, you can use privacy-focused, anonymous AI cameras that just count bodies, not faces.
You know, one of the absolute best applications of this tech that passengers can actually see comes from LNR in the UK. They use these little LED lights above each seat to show its status. Green means it's free, red means it's taken, but amber is the genius part. It means the seat is free now, but someone with a reservation is getting on later. This completely gets rid of that awkward, "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" dance for passengers. It's brilliant.
So, we've got the gates at the perimeter and the sensors on the train. Now we need the brain to connect it all. This is the third layer, a powerful, real-time data hub called the central nervous system. Its job is to constantly compare the live sensor data with the ticketing database to see if everything lines up.
And the core logic is simple, but it's so powerful. If the sensor says seat 4A is occupied, and the database says seat 4A is booked, great, we've got a match.
But if the sensor says seat 4B is occupied and the database says it's unbooked, the system immediately flags a mismatch. And that flag, that's the trigger for a human to get involved.
And that brings us to the final, and I think the most important phase of this entire framework. What happens when the system finds a problem? This is where the human element comes back in, but in a totally redesigned, much smarter role.
This quote from Dr. Majumdar just gets right to the heart of it. The goal isn't to get rid of staff, it's to change what they do. An unstaffed train is unsafe, it's unmanaged. The solution is to restaff it, but differently.
So the enforcement-focused conductor gets replaced by a passenger-welcome host. Their job isn't to proactively check every single ticket anymore. Instead, their job is service and safety. They only step in on a ticketing issue when the central system sends an alert to their device, something like, hey, go check out seat 4B.
Their main duties are now focused on these high-value human tasks. They become the go-to person for accessibility needs, and they're the trained safety officer for emergencies. Crucially, they're also trained in de-escalation to handle the kinds of conflicts that automation can sometimes create. They basically become ambassadors of service, not agents of enforcement.
So, if you're not cutting staff costs, you might be asking yourself, what's the business case for this huge investment? Well, the true return isn't in what you cut, but in what you gain.
Just consider one metric. China's e-ticketing system, which is a core part of this model, reduced the time it takes for a passenger to get through a gate by a staggering 57%. That is a massive increase in a station's capacity and efficiency, all without building a single new platform.
And this is the real payoff. You get a system that provides almost perfect revenue protection, basically stopping fare evasion in its tracks. The data from the intelligent carriage lets you find incredible operational efficiencies, like optimizing cleaning schedules or even energy use. But most importantly, it creates a safer, more accessible, and just a more welcoming experience for every single passenger.
You know, this entire framework ultimately leaves us with a really fascinating question. As technology automates more and more of these routine tasks, it doesn't actually make humans obsolete. Instead, it forces us to redefine our value, to shift our focus away from enforcement and towards the uniquely human skills of empathy, service, and safety. The future isn't about replacing people with machines, it's about using machines to empower people to be more human. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.